Okay, we have a vote on a rule on the budget resolution in the House called a Cromnibus Omnibus, and it's a little bit in the weeds to explain this. Therefore, nobody better than me to do it. What just happened is that the rule setting the stage for the vote later barely passed. They had to vote on the rule, the procedure, in order to set the stage for the vote on the final passage of the omnibus bill in the House of Representatives. The vote was very close. It was 214 to 212. Not a single Democrat voted for this. Now, you might say, so what? 214 Republicans did, so it passed. 212 Democrats voted to shut down the government, is what it means, in essence. Not a single Democrat voted for the rule that would then bring the budget up for vote in the House. In other words, 212 Democrats voted against the rule, voted against bringing up the final vote on the omnibus bill. Now, you could say, as I just did, that the Democrats essentially voted to shut down the government, but nowhere would this ever be portrayed as what actually happened. I've got to take another break here. As I went long in the opening segment, I apologize for that. But back before you know it, I'll explain all of this. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Il Rushbo, your guiding light, America's truth detector, doctor of democracy, America's real anchorman. All combined as one harmless, lovable little fuzzball. 214 to 212 procedural vote passed in the House of Representatives, which now clears the way to pass the omnibus budget bill in the House. The procedural vote is what is called a vote on the rule. And the rule governs debate and what is permitted during debate and who's permitted to. It basically gives Boehner the right to set the rules as he goes and set the stage to get votes as he needs them during the voting process. And if this were going to be stopped, it would have had to been stopped at this level, at this point, the rule. Voting, if the rule had gone down in defeat, then we'd be talking turkey here. But the rule passed. Now, here's the thing about the rule passing. 212 to 214, 214 to 212. No Democrats voted for the rule. No, in other words, not a single there were some Republicans that voted against it too. But the point is, not a single Democrat voted for the rule, which is what's necessary for the final vote and ultimate passage. So you could say, and you would be accurate in doing so, that 212 Democrats essentially voted to shut down the government. Now, they didn't win. They lost by 2. Now, if it had failed, and I know it's if, but I still want to make this point about things, because the reason this happened is because the Republicans are, well, everybody's saying it now. They're just cowards. They're afraid of the media. They are afraid of what's going to be said about them on some matters. Other things like amnesty, they actually agree with it and support it because most of their donors do, or big donors do. But if the rule had failed, with not a single Democrat voting for it, do you think anybody would have accused the Democrats of shutting down the government or endangering the economy or hurting the nation's poor or whatever they accused the Republicans of doing vis-a-vis a government shutdown? Because that's what happened. 212 Democrats essentially had the Democrats sided as one, we'd be looking at a government shutdown right now. And it would have been made possible by the Democrat Party because every damn one of them in the House voted against the rule. You could accurately say the Democrats in the House voted for a government shutdown. What, you want motivation? Who knows what motivation could have been to shut the government down because they know the Republicans are going to get blamed. Shut the government down because they don't like the spending and don't like the bill itself. Who knows? But the point here is that while the Republicans are running around scared to death, afraid to represent their constituents, the Republicans are running around afraid to act on the election returns because they're afraid what the media is going to say about them. And the biggest fear they've got is they're going to be blamed for government shutdown. And I'll tell you where it stems from. And we've addressed this before. It goes back to 1995. Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House. Bill Clinton was the president. The Republicans had had some success in balancing the budget before this, and the Democrats were reeling. Because for the first time in a long time, there was actually some spending discipline. The House featured a whole bunch of genuinely conservative members of the freshman class, and they arrived untainted. They arrived as virgins in terms of the way Washington worked. They were brand new. Nobody in the media knew who they were. They were not part of the old boy network. They were not part of the social structure. And they came in and they actually began to vote the same way they promised they would during the campaign, which featured the Contract for America. They did all of this. And they, for the first time, I'll never forget when John Kasich gavelled the Budget Committee to order and said, okay, the Democrats had exhausted all of their debate. And Kasich said, it's time to do this. And they did it, and they balanced the budget. And the Democrats were just paranoid. The Democrats were fit to be tied. Well, all of this led the Democrats to using new tricks to stop the Republicans. And one of the things that happened in the 1995 budget showdown was the school lunch cuts, if you'll recall. Now, stick with me on this because it's all a lesson. And I just want you to understand why the Republicans react the way they do today. And it's all because of what happened in 1995. The school lunch cuts, Democrats began to pepper the media in the country with the idea that Republicans wanted to starve kids. Now, the school lunch program was not going to be cut. No item in the budget ever is really cut. There are sometimes reductions in the rate of growth. But you know how that works with baseline budgeting. And, when an increase in budget spending is not as much as they'd hoped for, they call it a cut. You could spend 5% more next year than this. And if they expected 8%, they'd call it a 3% budget cut, when in reality it was a 5% increase. Well, that was what was happening with the school lunch program. The school lunch program was going to get more money spent, just not as much as the Democrats had thought and hoped. So they immediately began tarring the feathers of Republicans as people that wanted to starve kids. And the Republicans said, who's going to believe this? And they basically didn't think it was any problem. They didn't think that it was anything to panic over. Because who in the right mind is going to think that we want to starve kids? We have kids. This is absurd. And then all of a sudden, letters began to arrive in offices in Washington of members of the House. They were written by kids, supposedly. And the letters pretty much all said the same thing. Dear Mr. Congressman, I can't study when I'm starving. Dear Mr. Congressman, I can't learn when I'm hungry. Dear Mr. Congressman, please don't deny me lunch. I can't function if I don't have lunch. Nobody ever stopped to it was just simply idiotic. And, of course, if such a thing ever did really happen, what about parents and fixing lunch for their kids to take to school? None of that was ever considered. So the Republicans didn't really put a lot of stock in it and didn't fight back on it, which was a mistake. Now, they didn't have to fight back and defend themselves. Oh, we don't want to starve kids. What they should have said was, look at how ridiculous the Democrats have gotten now. We have the Democrats so much on the ropes that they're now accusing us of wanting to starve children. Is this the best they've got? But rather than do that, they did nothing, figuring nobody would believe it. Well, we all know better now, because the left has driven their base so insane they believe practically every insane allegation anybody on the left makes, from Hillary Clinton to Bill Clinton to Elizabeth Warren, you name it. So the government got shut down. Newt held fast on the Republican budget items, and the government got shut down. What we learned later was that Bill Clinton had made a closed-door, behind-the-scenes deal with government union leaders. And the deal was that whatever happened to them during the shutdown in terms of lost wages, Thanksgiving turkeys, you name, all of it would be made good once the shutdown ended. And so union leaders didn't oppose what was going to happen. They actually ended up supporting the Democrats in their opposition to this. And it isolated the Republicans, and then the media got in gear. And every night on CNN was a different person whose life had just been destroyed because of the government shutdown. And it went on like this for a couple of months. This happened in October. It went on like this for a couple of months, and finally the Republicans waved the white flag. And it's that experience that guides them to this day. They think that they had their heads handed to them on a silver platter back in 1995. And that's why, to this day, election results from last November, election results from 2010 don't matter. The only thing that matters is what happened in 1995. And if somebody produces a poll that says the same thing that happened in 95 is going to happen today, then that guides them. And by the way, a lot of people have asked me, Rush, you say that the Republican establishment's opposed to conservatives, and yet they've got 2 years, 2 terms of Reagan, 2 landslide Republican victories. And I said, great question, but that's not what the Republican establishment goes back to when they hear conservative. They only focus on Barry Goldwater. And so to the Republican establishment, a conservative nominee equals a Goldwater landslide loss. It does not equal a Reagan 2-term landslide win. So the Republican establishment and their consultants, everybody in the political class, is guided by, motivated by events from 1964 and 1995 in determining political strategy today. So here we are on the day where the procedural vote on this budget that basically is a Democrat budget, with a couple of exceptions, that funds the government through the end of next September. The rule was up for a vote, and not a single Democrat voted for it. And that means that all Democrats in the House voted essentially to shut down the government, because voting against the rule meant voting against the final vote on the budget, on the omnibus bill. But the ayes had it, 214 to 212. Not a single Democrat voted for the rule. Not a single Democrat essentially voted for the budget. They voted against the final vote taking place. And the only way to analyze it is that the 212 Democrats voting in unison essentially were voting to shut down the government. So my question is, had the procedural vote failed, had the vote on the rule failed, do you think that the House Democrats would have been accused of shutting down the government? Do you think they would have been accused of endangering the economy or hurting the nation's poor or whatever other disaster happens with a government shutdown? And what did they vote against? The Republican budget funds Obamacare. The Republican budget funds Obama's executive amnesty. This budget pays for everything the Democrats want, and yet it's conservatives are the problem, right? It's never the left that's the problem. It's never the Republican establishment. No, it's never Obama who's the problem. In matters like this, it always seems to come back to the fact that conservative Republicans are the problem. And yet 212 Democrats voted against the budget bill going forward, essentially voted for a government shutdown, knowing full well that had the government shutdown prevailed, had the rule gone down to defeat, the Republicans would have been blamed for it. Even though not a single Republican voted for a government shutdown. That's because they're scared to death that they're going to get blamed for it. So the answer, okay, so what should the Republicans do? It's become quaint. It's almost mockable when you answer the right thing. The right thing to do is to do the right thing and save the country. And to hell with what the media says about you. To hell with what the Democrats do. It's nutcracker time. In more ways than one. This is when you do the right thing. You save the country, and you know full well you've got a majority of voters behind you. That's what they elected you to do. And the 212 votes are not all Democrats. There's some Republicans that voted against the rule, too. My point to you is that every Democrat, every single Democrat voted against the rule. Which means at the end of the day that virtually every Democrat in the House voted for a government shutdown. Because had their side prevailed, that's what would have happened. If the rule had gone down to defeat, there could be no debate and no final vote on the bill. There's a story from Reuters on this. Democrats balk at U.S. spending bill raising shutdown risk. And that's true. However, as Elizabeth Warren is out there saying, it's the Republicans who want to shut down the government. Even though the Republicans passed the bill, the Republicans are the ones that wrote the damn thing. This is from, this is from yesterday, so that's good. This sets the stage. Now we know what happened, so let's look back at the way this was portrayed. Reuters, congressional Democrats objected Wednesday to controversial financial and political campaign provisions tucked into the $1.1 trillion spending bill, keeping the risk of a government shutdown alive. The complaints from Nancy Pelosi and other top Democrats clouded the chances for passage of the funding bill as a midnight Thursday deadline drew near. And in this story, there's not one syllable of outrage that the Democrats are running the risk of shutting down the government. Not one syllable of outrage from the media. And yet they're reporting right up front that had there been a shutdown, it would have been the Democrats, because the Democrats don't like a couple of provisions in Dodd-Frank. Now, basically, the provisions that they don't like have to do with campaign finance, campaign provisions, and some relaxing of restrictions on Wall Street evil barons. And the Democrats don't want to, so they voted against this. Every Democrat did. And it raised the shutdown risk. But, of course, it's not written about in any way, shape, manner, form that would have been bad. There's no outrage. Pelosi said Democrats are deeply troubled by Republican measures that would kill planned restrictions on derivatives trading by large federally insured banks and would expand tenfold the amounts that individuals can donate to national political parties. Pelosi said these provisions are destructive to middle-class families and to the practice of our democracy, and we got to get them out of the bill. Well, they're in the bill, and every Democrat voted against it. And here's Reuters acknowledging it could have resulted in a shutdown. And you know what? In this case, it would have been a good thing. Yeah. So government shutdowns, they're not bad. No, if the Democrats do them, government shutdowns are brilliant political strategery. When the Republicans do it, it's destructive, it's the end of civilization, and it proves they're a bunch of mean-spirited reprobates.